I was standing in line at the bank, thumbing through a grocery list in my notes app, when I first felt it, that offbeat rhythm beneath my ribs, like my heart forgot its timing. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The carpet smelled like old paper. And toner. A child cried softly near the counter. Everything felt normal, mundane, even. I had only come in to update my mailing address. A simple task. Proof of ID, a quick form done. But when I handed the teller my ID, she blinked at her screen. For a beat too long. Just a moment, ma'am. She said dot ma single quote same. She vanished into a back room. Minutes passed. I checked the time. 2:47 p.m. Then she returned with a manager. He smiled too politely. Miss Cole, before we process your change, we noticed there's been a recent activity on your account that may need your attention. A loan application approved and disbursed last month. My breath caught in my throat. There must be a mistake, I said. I didn't apply for any loan. He placed a paper on the counter. I leaned closer, got my name, my address, my birth date, and then a signature dot. It looked like mine. Slanted to the left, open loops, a curl on the final E. But I knew every stroke of my name. This one was dot 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 studied, mimicked, close enough to pass, far enough to haunt me. Who signed this? I asked. My voice was so soft it barely reached. My own ears. I assumed it was you, he said. I walked out in a daze. I didn't even remember putting my keys into the ignition. My hands trembled on the steering wheel the entire drive home. When I stepped into our apartment, the air smelled of sandalwood and something expensive, Alina's newest perfume. The one she only wore when she was celebrating. She was draped on the couch, legs crossed, a silk robe slipping off one shoulder. A half-empty wine bottle stood on the coffee table next to her sketch pad. A smear of crimson lipstick bloomed across the rim of her glass. Hey, babe, she purred without looking up. Did you remember almond milk? I stared at her dot my whole world. 7 years of shared space, holidays with her family, my bank passwords whispered in trust, my legal name hyphenated at her request, compressed into a single question. Did you sign my name on a bank loan? She blinked slowly. What? I asked again. Slower this time, dot at first. She laughed. You think I would do that? Then she got defensive. Why would I ever need to? I told you I'm getting that commission from the gallery soon. And then came the tears. I only did it because we were drowning. I was doing it for us. For us, dot. I remember standing in the doorway, rain from my coat dripping onto the hardwood floor, watching the mascara streak down her cheeks. I remember thinking, she believes this. She genuinely believes this is love. That night, I didn't speak. I just lay in bed beside her as she slept soundly, her breath warm on my neck. I stared at the ceiling, counting the cracks I'd ignored, the late nights, the overdraft notices, the stories that didn't quite line up, the way she always kept 1 foot outside the relationship, but all her bills firmly inside it. I thought of the day she asked me to combine our accounts. It's just easier. She said, we're a team now. And I, eager to be needed, to be chosen, had said yes. I turned onto my side. Her perfume lingered on the pillow. I hated that I still loved the scent. I hated that part of me still wanted to believe her, but somewhere between 2 o'clock and 4 a.m., something inside me splintered. Not anger, not sadness, a silence, a terrifying cavernous stillness, not just heartbreak. Identity theft. The next morning, the sun was too bright, the kitchen too quiet. I stood in front of the closet, fingers trailing over her things, her vintage scarves, her unfinished canvases, our Polaroids, curling at the edges, a postcard from Venice we never mailed, a necklace she said she bought for me, but I later found the receipt in her name. Every item suddenly felt dishonest, as if the entire room had colluded in the theft of my own story. Reached into the back of the closet and pulled out a small box, my birth certificate, passport, a few journals I hadn't opened in years. Anna's Miriam called out my name, whole, untouched. That's when the clarity came. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want drama or confrontation. I didn't want to scream or demand or plead. I wanted something deeper. I wanted my name back. The first time I saw Alina, she was sketching in a corner of a downtown gallery cross-legged on a faded Persian rug, surrounded by chaos, charcoal dust on her sleeves, a chipped mug of lukewarm espresso balanced on a paint-splattered stool. Her. Subject, a broken clock surrounded by wilted roses. I remember thinking how poetic it was, this stranger romanticizing decay. She wore a red scarf knotted at the base of her throat like a secret. Her hair was wild, untamed. Her eyes didn't ask for attention. They demanded it. I was there alone, nursing a plastic cup of wine, pretending to understand abstract acrylics. When she caught me staring, she smirked. "I hate clocks," she said, "but I love how they keep lying." I didn't know what that meant. I still don't, but I laughed anyway. She was magnetic in the way fire is beautiful, dangerous, uncontainable. And I, ever the quiet one, ever the careful one, found myself stepping closer to the heat. She moved in after 6 months. The first morning, I found her barefoot in the kitchen, playing Edith Piaf on the Bluetooth speaker and painting directly onto the refrigerator door with oil pastels. She smiled as though it was the most natural thing in the world. "We'll wash it off," she said. "Or we won't." That became her philosophy. Bills stacked like modern sculpture on our coffee table. Job offers ignored for artistic alignment. She'd disappear for days on creative retreats and return smelling like new lovers. And old cigarettes I should have left. But she would look at me and say, "You bring calm to my chaos." And I believe that made me special. Alina was the kind of woman who could make, I forgot, sound romantic. She forgot to pick me up from the airport. Forgot to pay rent twice in a row. Forgot my birthday one year. Then claimed the surprise was coming. The surprise never came. Instead, she handed me a sketch of a woman sitting on a windowsill, her back turned, a ribbon falling from her hair. It wasn't me. I knew it wasn't me. The figure had a grace I'd never possessed. Still I framed it. Still I hung it. I thought love meant understanding. I thought compromise meant giving more than you get. I thought patience was a virtue, but mostly I thought if I just held on long enough, she'd see me the way I saw her. The warning signs weren't loud. They were quiet, soft, polite dot, like the time I told her I'd gotten a promotion, and she smiled and said, "But you'll still have time for me, right?" Or the time I wore a silk dress to a friend's engagement party, and she frowned and said, "It's a little too ambitious. You look better when you're softer." She had opinions about my voice, said it carried too much teacher energy. She critiqued my walking pace, called it aggressively suburban. She accidentally broke the pearl necklace my mother had left me. The last gift before the chemo took her smile. She said it got caught in her scarf. I found the clasp crushed in the garbage disposal. She apologized, said she felt awful. Bought me a ring from a vintage shop the next day, a peace offering. The metal turned my finger green. My sister, Harper, noticed first. "Why do you shrink around her?" she asked one afternoon over coffee. I blinked. I didn't know I had. "She doesn't lift you. She leans on you," she added. "Constantly." "You've stopped laughing, Annis." I told her she was overreacting, that Alina was just intense, that we had passion, that it was just a hard phase. But later that night, I lay beside Alina, her head on my chest, my arm numb from holding her too long, and realized I couldn't remember the last time I had laughed either. Even our dog, an old rescue mutt named Lou, started sleeping under my desk instead of the bed. Alina said he was sensitive to energy. She wasn't wrong. Lou always knew when a storm was coming. I remember once telling Alina that I used to write short stories. I hadn't written in years. She leaned in and said, "You? Really? That's cute." Cute. She never read a single one. Instead, she'd make me read her artist statements, 10 pages of florid sentences about existential silence and collapsing femininity. When one offered edits, she'd pout. "You just don't feel things the way I do, double quotes, no. I felt things quietly. I suffered. In LOWERCACE. There were so many moments I could have walked away. But I didn't, because women like us are conditioned to perform resilience like a talent show act, to stay silent for the sake of understanding, to twist ourselves into softer versions that won't rattle the ego of the person we love. Thought, if I keep giving, surely she'll stop taking. But Alina didn't stop, because people don't stop drinking when they're still thirsty, and she was always parched for validation, attention, admiration, and I was the well she kept returning to. Until there was nothing left but sand. The worst part, I let it happen, all at once, not in one grand sacrifice. It was death by 1,000 kindnesses. Every time I didn't speak up, every time I swallowed my truth, every time I said, "It's fine," when it wasn't, I thought I was preserving love. But I was preserving her at the cost of myself. Looking back, I realized now I had confused emotional labor with intimacy. I thought carrying her burdens meant we were bonded, that bending meant belonging, but I wasn't her partner. I was her canvas. And she painted over me every day. Silence wasn't peace. It was surrender. 2 weeks after the bank. 2 weeks of silence, of avoidance, of pretending to function, until one email tore the last of my illusions open like wet paper. Subject: congratulations on your upcoming solo exhibit. Sender: curator at bloomgallerynyc.com. I stared at the subject line, not breathing. At first, I thought it was spam, a mistake, a phishing attempt. I hadn't picked up a paintbrush in 5 years. Not since I started tutoring full-time. Not since Alina told me gently, "Your style's a bit academic, not really marketable." But the body of the email proved otherwise. Your series exploring generational femininity, grief, and rebirth is exactly what our spring showcase is built around. It's an honor to feature Anais and Cole. We're so inspired by your story. My story? The gallery was one I used to dream about before I boxed up MY canvases and traded paint for practicality. A real gallery, real curators, real exposure. I clicked the attached press kit. There it was. A photo of a canvas my style, but warped. Harsher strokes, slightly unbalanced composition. I recognized the bones, though. It was my color palette, my subject matter, my mother's face. The biography read like a copy of an old grant application I once submitted, line for line. Even the quote from my late grandmother, "Art is just grief with a brush." I stood, knocking my chair over. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. It wasn't just the art dot, it was my name, my identity, paraded through a city I'd left behind, under lights I'd never asked for. Alina was in the kitchen when I got home, playing Nina Simone and stirring lentils as if nothing in the world had fractured. She looked up with a bright smile. "I made your favorite." I didn't say it. I held up my phone and opened the email. Her smile faltered for half a second before she replaced it with the face I now recognized as her mask. The performance began. "Oh," she said casually, "you weren't supposed to see that yet. It was a surprise." My voice came out quieter than I intended. "You signed my name." She tilted her head. "You weren't using it." "Not really." "Not using it?" I tried again. "You stole my art, my degree, my story." "Stole?" She laughed then. "God, Anais, you're so dramatic. I was honoring you." I mean, let's be honest, you gave up painting. I just didn't want your voice to die. She tapped her chest like she was doing me a favor. I made it matter. I gave it a platform. You should be thanking me. Something inside me snapped. I walked to the sink, picked up the mug she'd gifted me on our second anniversary, Muse, painted in gold cursive, and smashed it against the tiled wall. She jumped. You made me disappear, I said. You took everything, my credit. My future, my name. You didn't save me. You used me. Alina's face hardened. The performance was over. You're just jealous. You couldn't make it work. I did. And in that moment, all the lies crystallized. She'd never been confused. She'd never been chaotic. She was calculated. I locked myself in the bathroom that night. It wasn't about the mug or the loan or even the gallery. It was the slow realization that I no longer existed in the life I had built. She had rewritten me so thoroughly that even my reflection looked foreign. I sat on the cold floor, back against the tub, knees drawn up like a child. I cried with the kind of silence that feels ancient, the kind of crying you do when you're no longer asking for help, just marking the loss. I wrote my will on a notepad I kept for shopping lists. Not because I planned to die, but because it felt like I already had. Everything that once made me me had been absorbed, distorted, and sold under a name that belonged to me, but not anymore. My art, my history, my bloodline, my mother's pearls. I had been erased in plain sight. I didn't sleep. At dawn, I wandered into the living room. The sun broke over the windows, and Alina's paintings, my paintings, leaned against the walls like ghosts. They looked at me the way she never had, and for the first time in weeks, something stirred beneath the grief. A flicker. A hum. Not anger, not revenge. Something older. I want my name back. Not legally, not even publicly, but spiritually, emotionally, existentially. I wanted to hear it in my own mouth again. I wanted to write it and feel it ring true. I wanted to sign it to something that belonged to me. Fully. Later that morning, Alina came into the bedroom, twirling her phone. I just got confirmation, she said breezily. They're going to use your old self-portrait as the centerpiece for the exhibit. Don't worry, I'll give you credit in the notes. It was the final insult, a footnote in my own story. I looked her in the eyes. You don't get to use me anymore, she shrugged. Fine, walk away, Annis. Let another woman waste your talent. I'll still be on stage next month. I didn't respond. Not then, because I had no intention of walking away quietly. I wasn't going to fight her on her terms, tears and tantrums and shattered glass. I was going to reclaim what she stole by becoming something she couldn't imitate. Whole, unapologetic, visible. That night, I dug through my storage bin in the closet, found my MFA diploma, my old sketchbooks, a photo of my mother holding a painting of mine at my first college exhibit. I lit a candle, and for the first time in 5 years, I opened a blank canvas. Signed my full name at the corner, Annis Miriam Cole. It felt like resurrection. I left before the sun even dared to rise. No goodbye note. No key left on the counter. Just the echo of my footsteps in a hallway that had held too many ghosts. 2 bags, one filled with clothes, the other with my sketchbooks, documents, and the one framed photo of my mother I hadn't let Alina touch. A prepaid phone with no contact list. A lease under my real name, Annis Miriam Cole, not Annis Snot Ana. Not the name she hyphenated, reshaped, softened. I remember pulling out of the city like it was a lover I was finally leaving, familiar, heavy, and full of history. The skyline disappeared in my rearview mirror, but its weight lingered. For 2 hours, I drove through fog and farmland, windows cracked, silence humming like a prayer. My hands shook the entire time, but I didn't turn around. The coastal town was small, a sleepy community tucked between gray cliffs and olive trees. The air smelled like salt and wood smoke. When I got out of the car and stepped into my new apartment, a one-bedroom above a used bookstore, I cried. Not loudly, just a single release of breath and water and relief. The mattress was thin, the windows squeaked, but it was mine. No one had ever loved me here. No one had lied to me here. It was a blank page. I didn't speak much for the first week. I ordered groceries online, ate crackers and cheese. Slept too much, then not at all. I walked the beach in the early morning. When only the seagulls and retired couples ventured out, the silence was deafening at first. I had grown used to Chaos Alina's music blasting through the apartment at midnight, her rants about critics who just didn't get her, her laughter echoing off the bathroom tiles while I sat in the next room pretending to read .now. The only sound was the ocean. And my breath, which slowly started to feel like my own again. There were moments that broke me, like the first time I went to the grocery store and saw my favorite T1 Alina used to say was too bland. I put it in my basket, stared at it, and started crying in aisle 3 . Or the night a song came on in a local cough, the one she used to hum while painting. I froze coffee halfway to my lips and left without paying. Grief is never just about the person. It's about the soundtrack, the routines, the little permissions we once asked for without realizing. It's about unlearning the apology you became, but there were other moments, 2 small ones. Real ones. A teenage student brought me lilacs after my 3rd watercolor class. They reminded me of your blouse, she said. I hadn't even realized I'd worn lilac that day. A librarian complimented my handwriting when I signed up for a library card. Your name has rhythm, she said. An old man saw me sketching at a pier bench and mistook me for a poet. He asked if I'd read aloud from my notebook. I didn't correct him. I read something about waves and shadows and the space between names. He wept. In those moments, I wasn't anyone's muse. I wasn't the soft place someone crashed into. I was my own witness, and it was enough. I started painting again. Not for submission, not for validation. Just to feel what my hands could do when they were trembling. To remember the difference between creation and performance. I painted sea glass, wrinkled palms, the chipped coffee mug from the bookstore downstairs. My own face age, tired, truer. I hung one painting in every room, even the bathroom. They weren't brilliant, but they were honest out slowly. I began to reclaim myself in small legal ways. I filed a police report. I opened a new bank account. I wrote letters to 3 galleries, one of which had accepted Alina's work under my name. I sent photocopies of my MFA degree, old journal entries, sketches with dates long before Alina ever held a brush. One responded with an apology. Another took down the promotional material. It wasn't a courtroom scene. It wasn't headlines. But it was something. The process was slow, bureaucratic, boring even. But every form I filled out under my name felt like a stitch in skin I hadn't realized was wounded. I began journaling. Every night. Some entries were just lists. The tea I like, chamomile, lavender. My favorite scent, rain on pavement. Things I no longer pretend to enjoy. Loud parties, spicy food, performative intimacy. Some were longer. Letters to my younger self. To the girl who thought silence meant strength. To the woman who mistook attention for affection. To the part of me that still flinched when the doorbell rang. I stopped wearing makeup. I let my curls grow wild again. I wore soft clothes and white shoes and long sleeves in colors Alina would have called washed out. I no longer cared about what made me appealing. I cared about what made me whole. And bit by bit, wholeness returned. Not with fanfare, but with quiet recognition. In the way my spine straightened while walking to the post office, and how I looked people in the eye again, and how I no longer feared my own reflection. The town didn't ask questions. People took me as I was. No one knew about Alina. No one. That's why I sometimes stared off mid-dash sentence. Here. I was just Anna S., the art teacher who bought lilacs on Wednesdays and always returned her library books early. No forwarding address. No explanation required. One night, I found myself standing at the shoreline, barefoot in sand that still held the warmth of the day. The sky was a deep ink blue. The moon rising like a breath held too long. I whispered my name to the sea. Let it roll off my tongue. Not darling. Not babe. Not you're my rock. Just Annis Miriam Cole Dot. And for the first time in years, it sounded like a name I wanted to keep. It took months, long, slow months filled with paperwork, therapy sessions, pro bono legal meetings in cramped offices, and the quiet discipline of staying alive when no one was watching. I collected copies of the forged loan applications, compared the loops and strokes in the signatures to old birthday cards I'd once written. My lawyer, a tired but kind woman named Miriam, I smiled the first time I heard her name, said, "This is open and shut if we can keep it quiet." Quiet was something I had become fluent in. She filed for identity restoration. One submitted statements to the credit bureau. Bit by bit, the world began to remember I existed. At night, I painted. Not to escape, but to understand. I painted my own hands. My back, my jawline, my scars, they were not glamorous. They were not stylized, they were mine. And for the first time, they didn't need to be beautiful to be valid. Therapy taught me words I had never allowed myself to use: enmeshment, narcissistic mimicry, relational erasure. But even more powerful was the silence that came after naming, the breath, the space. The permission to rebuild without asking anyone to watch. Then one afternoon, as I was clicking through old art foreign threads, it blinked across my screen like a lightning strike. Alina, a solo exhibition, The Women Who Held Me. This Friday. Exclusive gallery preview in Manhattan. I clicked and froze. The promotional flyer showed a stylized painting of a woman hunched at a desk. The profile, the posture, even the chipped ring on her pinky. It was me. Another piece showed a soft blur of a figure curled on tile, surrounded by shards of ceramic. I stared, then laughed. The bitter kind. The kind that ends in tears. It wasn't just that she'd taken my art. She'd taken me. My body. My grief, my memories, distorted, reinterpreted, renamed, framed under her label. She hadn't just stolen my story. She had edited it, but I didn't fall apart this time. I didn't throw anything. I didn't cry on the bathroom floor. I stood up, walked to the desk, printed the gallery flyer, clipped it to a thick folder of evidence, booked a train ticket, and emailed Miriam. Friday. I'm ready. The days before the exhibit passed. With purpose, I reread my journals. I practiced my voice. I recited what I would say not to Alina, but to anyone who might ask. Not to accuse, but to correct. Each day, I finished one self-portrait. They weren't flattering, they weren't soft, but they were honest. One showed me in the mirror, brush in hand, looking slightly away like I was trying to find myself beyond the reflection. Another was all color and chaos, just outlines and motion, no face at all. The last one was quiet, just my eyes, looking straight ahead. On the morning of the exhibit, I put on the pearl necklace Alina had broken years ago during a fight now. Restrung by my own hand, I wore a navy blue suit. No makeup. I carried only one thing, the folder. Labeled in black ink, coal, identity and work restoration materials. Not revenge, not performance. Just proof. The gallery buzzed with soft laughter and white wine when I walked in. People moved slowly under soft lights, whispering words like intimate, haunting, so visceral. I recognized every piece. A canvas titled Muse in Blue was me in a coat I hadn't worn in 4 years. Descent 2022 was the painting I'd started after my mother's death, the version I'd torn up, but clearly she'd photographed. Before I did, Threshold was my old studio, crypt shelves and all. I stood in the center of it all like a ghost at her own funeral. Alina stood near the back, radiant and sharp. She wore my color. My earrings. Even her posture mimicked mine from an old photo we once took on the balcony. For a moment, I just watched her. She laughed. She touched someone's arm. She basked. I remembered the way she used to whisper to me, "You're invisible unless someone loves you." But here I was visible, present, whole, and I no longer needed her to see me. A journalist approached me, mistaking me for a guest. Stunning work, isn't it? She said these were inspired by an anonymous muse who rescued her from silence. She pointed to Descent. I said clearly, "That was mine." She blinked. "Sorry, I painted that years ago. In my name, before it was taken from me." I handed her a copy of the legal statement. "I'm Annis Miriam Cole," I said. "I'm the artist behind this, and I'm here to correct the record." The next moments moved fast. The journalist's smile faded. Then she looked down at the documents. She read. She asked permission to quote. I said yes. Alina noticed the stir. She turned and saw me. For a second, her expression wavered. Not shame. Not fear. Just annoyance. As if I'd shown up to the wrong role in the script she'd written. She walked over, smooth as always. "Really? You had to make a scene?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flinch. I simply said, "It's not a scene. It's a statement." I held out the gallery program. My name doesn't appear once. And yet my body's in every frame. She looked down at the flyer, then back at me. "You're so dramatic. This isn't about you." I smiled. "That's the first true thing you've said in years. This is about me reclaiming me, not you." Security stepped in soon after, not for me, but to manage the guests now, murmuring and pointing. My lawyer arrived 10 minutes later, calm and composed. She handed the gallery curator a cease and desist packet. By evening, half the pieces had been covered with sheets. By morning, the gallery's website had updated, under review due to credibility dispute. I didn't stay for the fallout. I didn't need to. The victory wasn't in the headlines. It wasn't even in the takedown. It was in walking out with my spine straight and getting on the train with empty hands and a steady heart. Back home, I unpacked my own series, the self-portraits. I hung them in the local cafe. The owner, a gentle woman with silver braids, said, "These feel real." I nodded. "They are." The next week, one of my students brought her mother to class. She's the one I told you about, the real artist. Her mother looked at me, then at my hands. "You've got paint on your wrists," she said. "That's how I know you're not pretending." That night, I stood at the mirror, the one above the sink in the apartment that still smelled faintly of lilacs and sea salt. I traced the pearls on my neck, took in the lines around my eyes. I wasn't flawless, but I was whole. I whispered my name again, not to reclaim it, but to celebrate it. Annis Miriam Cole, seen, heard, held, in full color. The gallery was already buzzing by the time I arrived. The marquee outside read, "Alina's The Women Who Held Me. Closing night, artists talk inside. Champagne flutes caught the light like suspended glass stars." People swirled in quiet circles, murmuring praise, snapping photos of canvases. My old griefs turned abstract under someone else's brush. At the far end of the gallery, Alina stood on a raised platform. She looked every inch the visionary. Dark lipstick, a sculptural black dress, hand resting lightly on the microphone. "I've often been asked," she said, her voice like velvet, "how I found the strength to emerge from silence." Cameras clicked. The crowd leaned in. It wasn't easy. I was abandoned, left to rebuild from ashes, but I turned pain into portraiture. Each of these women, she gestured toward the canvases, held me. They held space for me when I could not hold myself. A soft collective sigh moved through the room. Then applause. Applause so loud it echoed. I waited until it faded. Then I stepped forward. Through the crowd, pearl necklace glinting under the lights. I didn't rush. I didn't shout. I walked up the aisle between guests, folder in hand, a ripple of confusion. Moved ahead of me. "I'm Annis Cole," I said, voice calm but firm. "The woman behind every one of these paintings." Silence fell like glass shattering. Alina's smile didn't falter at first. She blinked like maybe she hadn't heard correctly. But I kept going. "These aren't tributes. They're theft." That, I pointed to Muse in blue, was painted after a miscarriage. Descent came from a grief she never lived. Now the crowd turned. Eyes darted between me and the art, between me and her. I walked to the curator, an older man in a plum suit, and handed him the folder. Inside, notarized legal documents, copyright filings in my name, time-stamped photos, texts, email threads, credit report fraud entries tied to her accounts. "I'm not here to destroy her," I said, gently, clearly. "I'm here to exist." The curator opened the folder. His face fell. Alina stepped off the stage, slow and deliberate. She walked toward me like she still had control, like this was a misunderstanding that could be smoothed. "Annis," she said, her voice lower now. "Don't do this." I met her eyes. "You already did." Security approached, hesitant, waiting for direction. "I'm not disrupting," I said. "I'm correcting." I looked at the crowd, now silent and wide-eyed. "You've been admiring a gallery of ghosted truth. And I've spent 2 years reclaiming that truth." "That name." Security touched my elbow gently. "Ma'am." "It's okay," I said. "I've said what I needed." I turned head high and walked out flanked by whispers and flashing phones, but I didn't feel erased. I felt returned outside. The night was warm as I stood on the sidewalk. A journalist from Modern Medium ran up to me. "I saw what happened," she said breathlessly. "Do you have time for a statement?" "Yes," I said. I handed her a press packet, something Miriam had helped me prepare. "Just in case. I don't want headlines," I said. "Just truth." She borrowed my pain. "I just asked to be named." The journalist nodded, her recorder running. "What would you title this chapter of your life?" She asked that. I smiled. The name on the wall. The article dropped within 24 hours. It went viral within 48. Artist Annis Cole reclaims her work from Rising Stars exhibit. Ghost Muse no more. The real woman behind Alina's paintings speaks out. Hashtags trended. Hashtag art theft. Hashtag ANAI says returns. Hashtag the real muse. The gallery suspended the exhibit within 2 days. By the end of the week, several paintings were removed from online listings, and then, finally, a call from the district attorney's office. They'd received the documents. The fraud charges were moving forward, but that wasn't the moment. I felt peace. That came later. It came when I walked into my coastal town's tiny community center, carrying 6 new paintings my own. The exhibit was titled, "The Woman Who Returned." People came. Not many. Neighbors, students, the woman from the cafe who always called me darlin'. They didn't whisper. They asked questions. They didn't gasp. They nodded, eyes shining. One painting showed me with salt in my hair and charcoal on my hands. Another was abstract, just layers of blue and gray and white, like waves you could feel more than see. One was just a torso mine marked with faint brushstroke scars and overlaid with a pearl necklace that glowed like moonlight. The last one, a woman by the sea, sitting on driftwood, her back to the viewer, wind in her hair. pearl necklace around her throat like armor. Catching the final light of sunset dot, she was smiling. Someone asked me if it was a self-portrait. Yes, I said. But not of who I was, of who I am now. They nodded, quiet, then added, she looks free. That night, as I closed the gallery room and walked home, the ocean breeze hit my face like a blessing. I didn't think of Alina. I didn't need. T.O. She no longer lived inside my art. I lived there now, back in my small studio. I unpacked the nameplate that used to hang on my old apartment door in the city. Annis Miriam Cole. I nailed it above my easel. Not because I needed anyone else to see it, but because I never wanted to forget again. Some weeks later, a letter came in the mail. Thick, expensive paper. No return address. I opened it cautiously. Inside, a typed apology. Not from Alina, from her gallery. We deeply regret the role we played in misrepresenting the origins of the work. We are taking steps to ensure this never happens again. A formal retraction has been published. Enclosed was a printed correction. We acknowledge Annis Miriam Cole as the original artist and source of inspiration for several pieces presented by Alina. I held the letter for a long time, then filed it away, not in my evidence drawer, but in a frame. Taught a class the next month. Voice through paint, owning your narrative. It was full. Women of all ages. Some had never picked up a brush. Some came just to sit in the light. I told them on the first day, art is not just what you make. It's what you claim. It's the refusal to disappear. At the end of the semester, they surprised me. Each student had painted a version of the woman by the sea. One gave her braids. Another put a book in her hand. One painted her black. One made her older. One had her standing instead of sitting, but in every version, the wind still moved through her hair. And she always smiled. I cried. Not loud, just enough to know I'd come full circle. There are still days I wake up unsure, still moments. I catch myself flinching at old memories, but then I walk past the gallery or glance at my easel, or hear a student say, "This feels like me." And I remember I was never erased, just interrupted. Now I finish the sentences myself. My name is Annis Miriam Cole. It's on the gallery plaque, on the class syllabus, on the prints people hang above their desks. It's even scribbled on the back of napkins when strangers ask, who painted that piece with the pearls and the wind? And maybe it's not famous, but it's mine. And no one gets to wear it without asking again.